Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, the Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit opens in Busan today, bringing together the leaders of Korea and 10 Southeast Asian countries as they look to take their partnership to the next level. Korea strikes its 15th free trade agreement. The latest deal with Vietnam paves the way for further liberalization of the South Korea-ASEAN free trade agreement. Plus, a Palestinian cabinet minister dies after clashes between demonstrators and Israeli troops during a protest in the West Bank. Daybreak begins now.
Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Thursday, December 11th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we start with the highly anticipated Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit, which kicks off in just a few hours' time. Korean President Park Geun-hye and 10 Southeast Asian leaders will be in Korea's southern port city of Busan for the next 2 days for talks on ways to strengthen their economic and diplomatic ties on the 25th anniversary of their relations. Kicking off the event is a CEO summit later this morning. More than 550 business leaders from the region will be networking and discussing a wide range of issues. The heads of Korean firms will also share their insights with their Southeast Asian counterparts. Now, on the diplomatic front, President Park will hold bilateral talks with the leaders of 6 ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, the Philippines and Singapore. The president will discuss her Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative and ways to deal with North Korea's nuclear weapons program. And getting a head start on the Korea-ASEAN Summit, the leaders of Korea and Vietnam on Wednesday announced the conclusion of their free trade agreement. The deal comes after more than 2 years of negotiations. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
The concluding of Korea's free trade agreement with Vietnam may not seem like a big deal, considering the 7-year-old Korea-ASEAN FTA, but it's expected to help Korean small and mid-sized firms increase their exports to the Southeast Asian nation. Vietnam will remove tariffs on 200 additional products from Korea, including auto parts and cosmetics, many of which are manufactured by SMEs. Hanoi has also agreed to simplify its rules of origin and customs clearance, allowing textile and garments made in the inter-Korean Kaesang Industrial Complex to benefit from the simplified process. Seoul will open its market for nearly 500 additional Vietnamese goods, while excluding sensitive agricultural products such as rice, fresh garlic, and ginger. Korean companies specializing in tires and cotton anticipate boosting price competitiveness against their Japanese rivals in Vietnam. Compared to Tokyo's FTA with Hanoi, Korea has secured liberalization of more goods entering Vietnam, 2 percentage points higher in terms of import value. Considering Vietnam is Korea's #1 investment destination in Southeast Asia, the two sides have also bolstered protective measures for their respective investors. Although the FTA with Vietnam will have a relatively limited effect on the domestic economy, it's expected to help Korea in joining regional trade networks such as the China-led FTAAP. It's also expected to speed up negotiations for two-way deals with other ASEAN members to increase Korean businesses' usage of the trade pact. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News, Busan.
Now on to another event ahead of the Korea-ASEAN Summit, and President Park also sat down with her Malaysian counterpart on Wednesday during talks with Prime Minister Najib Razak at the presidential office in Seoul. The Korean president spoke highly of Malaysia's reforms and its development initiatives. She also referred to Korea's past participation in Malaysia's infrastructure projects. This comes as Seoul is seeking to win bids in a very lucrative highway project that would link the Southeast Asian nation with Singapore. Now, this week's summit won't be all work and no play, because it's not just leaders of the 10 ASEAN member countries who are in Korea this week for that commemorative summit. Representative landmarks of ASEAN nations will be making a visit as well. Our Park Ji-won reports.
These lighted installation art pieces are called the Jewels of ASEAN, with each representing a landmark in each of the 10 ASEAN member countries. From the magnificent Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Mosque in Brunei to the famous Buddhist site of Sheragan Pagoda in Myanmar, the replicas are set up at Gwanghwamun Square, facing Korea's landmark Gyeongbokgung Palace. They symbolize the rich cultures and values of the ASEAN countries.
We are the traveler from Thailand, and we are happy to see our landmark from Thailand is Wat Arun. It's a representative temple in Thailand, very popular in Thailand.
The exhibition was organized to celebrate the beginning of the two-day ASEAN-Korea Summit that starts Thursday in the southeastern port city of Busan.
Each embassy of the respective ASEAN countries designated their representative landmark. They symbolize each member country's cultural heritage, their history, and their future. We hope the project facilitates a deeper understanding of ASEAN countries among the Korean public.
During the exhibition period, a tourism booth will provide visitors information on popular tourist destinations in ASEAN member countries. Fun events like quiz competitions are in store as well. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, in other news today, South Korea's unification minister has called on Seoul and Washington to do more to re-engage with North Korea. Speaking at a forum on Korean unification in the U.S. Capitol on Wednesday, Reengaging said that while South Korea and the U.S. have been trying to make Pyongyang change its ways, doing so in an atmosphere of cooperation and dialogue is much more effective. The minister also said that Pyongyang should be shown the benefits of cooperating with the world, adding that a more open North Korea will boost the quality of North Koreans' lives and encourage the regime to deal with its human rights issue. Minister Ryu is in the United States to raise awareness of Seoul's push to reunify the two Koreas. A renowned nuclear scientist says North Korea could be in possession of about 20 nuclear bombs in just over 1 year's time. Siegfried Hecker, who was in Seoul for a Korea-US forum, told a group of South Korean lawmakers on Wednesday that Pyongyang is presumed to have the capability to produce some 4 nuclear bombs a year. He added that North Korea could conduct several rounds of detonation tests to miniaturize nuclear warheads. In April, Hecker was reported to have said the North had around 10 nuclear bombs. Now, South Korea's rival political parties have reached middle ground on pending legislation centered on boosting the economy and tackling corruption in the public sector. They also agreed to reform the civil servant pension program and launch a special probe into corruption in the defense industry. Ji Myung-gil reports.
The leaders of Korea's two main rival parties had much to discuss at Wednesday's meeting. They settled a number of differences, first and foremost agreeing that their top priority should be economic revitalization. Considering that real estate accounts for more than 80% of the nation's total wealth, lawmakers decided to pass revised real estate bills at the next plenary session slated for the end of this month. The move is intended to curb inflation in the real estate market and to lessen the financial risks for renters and home buyers. For more than a decade, Korea has been trying to address its growing pension deficit that stems from problems with the current pension system for public servants. The two parties agreed Wednesday to establish a pan-national body to gain social consensus on the issue. Public servants have shown fierce resistance to the Saenuri Party's proposed pension reform bill since it was drafted in late October. While the bill aims to secure pension funds for future generations, it requires public servants to pay more into the system while giving them less in return starting in 2016. In addition, the two parties agreed to a parliamentary audit of a recent defense industry corruption scandal. if the results of a current investigation led by prosecutors is deemed unsatisfactory. Last month, the government launched a probe into growing allegations of bribery between military officials and defense firms. Leaders of the rival parties also agreed to discuss other unsettled matters at a later date, such as opening a parliamentary audit of the controversial $20 billion project to refurbish the country's 4 major rivers carried out under the former Lee Myung-bak administration. 김영길, Arirang News.
A state-run institute has lowered its growth estimate for Korea for this year and next year. The Korea Development Institute says it expects the Korean economy to grow 3.4% in 2014 and 3.5% in 2015. Both revised forecasts are 0.3 percentage points lower than the institute's previous estimates that were given out in the first half of this year. The institute said it made its decision in light of weak domestic consumption, slowing investment and uncertainties overseas. In particular, the KDI cited slowing export growth to China and the European Union. Now, falling prices and an aging society here in Korea have prompted many analysts to draw parallels with Japan, which has suffered from decades of lost growth. Experts say if Korea wants to avoid a similar fate, the government needs to speed up its envisioned structural reforms. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
Several key economic indicators, though more than 2 decades apart, are strikingly similar. For Japan, it was 1989 when growth slowed to the 0% range, shortly before becoming an aging society. It's like déjà vu across the East Sea. Korea's fertility rate, the average number of children a woman has in her lifetime, has hovered around 1.2 in the past 4 years. That's well below the threshold of 2.1 needed to maintain the current population level. The poor fertility rate comes at a time Korea is being hit by the double whammy of low growth and a rapidly aging population. If Korea does follow the footsteps of Japan and enter a long-term slump, it's expected to take a harder blow than Japan did. That's because Korea's pension program and safety nets are not as comprehensive as Japan's were. Retirees and those preparing for their later years will cut back in spending, in turn fueling deflation and creating a vicious cycle. Economists say to prevent a long-term recession, reforms are needed, especially in the labor and manufacturing sectors. The government will also have to seek more flexible and efficient policies.
The reason Japan could not counter a recession was that their measures were too short-sighted. In order not to follow Japan's footsteps, Korea's reform and restructuring must be aimed at securing growth engines in the long term, which could raise its growth potential.
To realize that potential, economists say priority must be given to creating more jobs for the younger generation before extending the retirement age. Experts point out that Korea has one competitive edge at the moment. Its asset bubble is not as severe as Japan's. But they say reforms are needed now and needed quickly. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korean firms are notorious for low dividend payments, and that looks like it will be the case this year as well. Latest data from the Korea Exchange shows the dividend payout ratio stands at around 22.5% of net income this year. That is far below the global average of almost 48%. Analysts, however, expect local companies to raise their dividend payouts in the face of growing pressure from investors and the government. Korea's finance minister has blamed low dividend payouts for the undervaluation of Korean shares when compared to the strength of the Korean economy and its companies. Now, one of Korea's biggest companies, if not the biggest, Samsung, and specifically Samsung Electronics, is having a field day in the United States as techies scramble to get their hands on the Korean company's latest virtual reality head-mounted display. The Gear VR quickly sold out after its release on Monday. You can see it there. This forced Samsung to tap into its inventory to meet the intense demand. With this version, users can experience 3D virtual reality with 360-degree views on a 5.7-inch Quad HD Super AMOLED display. And when it's connected with the Galaxy Note 4, contents provided by Facebook's subsidiary company Oculus are automatically downloaded onto this device. And this gives users the option to download 3D movies and watch them on the headset for the full 3D experience. Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following on this Thursday morning here in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. A Palestinian minister has died after he and other activists were confronted by Israeli police officers near the West Bank. They were on their way to a protest against Jewish settlements on Wednesday when a group of some 30 Israeli soldiers and border police fired tear gas and sound grenades at the group. Video was captured showing the 55-year-old Ziad Abu Ain being pushed and apparently strangled, then looking faint as he fell to the ground. He was pronounced dead on his way to a hospital. An autopsy is being carried out to confirm the cause of death. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas expressed shock at the minister's killing and remembered Ain as a martyr. He said the leadership would discuss a proper response as he vowed to not be silent about it. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has also expressed his deep sadness by the news and urged Israeli authorities to promptly conduct a thorough and transparent investigations. Tensions remain high between Israel and Palestine after months of unrest in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Hong Kong police are set to begin clearing out the remaining protest sites starting today, potentially marking an end to the sit-ins that have stopped traffic for more than 10 weeks. Demonstrators had been pushing the city's leadership to challenge Beijing's hand in its politics, starting with the coming chief executive polls in 2017. The clearance would include the main camp in Admiralty near the government headquarters. Notices were put up on Tuesday afternoon urging protesters to leave voluntarily, warning authorities could not promise there would be no confrontations. While some were seen packing up to leave, others, including student leader Alex Chow, vowed to return Thursday morning while committing to wage non-violent protest. And after a year-long trek across Mars, NASA says its Curiosity rover has obtained new evidence that strongly suggests the red planet may have had a more moderate climate. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports on Mars's ancient lakes.
NASA says the red planet may have maintained a climate millions of years ago that could have formed lakes. Observations by the space agency's Curiosity rover in August show deposits of sediments around Mount Sharp, a large 5 kilometers high peak in Gale crater that resembled deltas formed at river mouths on Earth. Ashin Vasavada, Curiosity deputy project scientist, says this finding could challenge previous arguments that wet conditions were short-lived or only underground on Mars.
Over a span of perhaps millions of years, water flowed from the northern rim of Gale crater towards the center, bringing sediment that slowly formed the lower layers of Mount Sharp.
NASA says this revelation, however, does not prove the existence of past life forms on the planet. Researchers have yet to identify the conditions that could have produced long periods of warm atmosphere to maintain stable water on the surface. But one thing's for sure, the Curiosity project has taken a giant leap forward in uncovering some of the red planet's best-kept mysteries. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Time magazine has given this year's honor of Person of the Year to the men and women fighting on the front lines of the Ebola outbreak. It issued 5 different covers featuring 5 individuals, including Liberian surgeon Dr. Jerry Brown and American missionary Dr. Kent Brantley. It applauded the bravery and commitment of healthcare workers and caregivers who it said were willing to stand and fight the epidemic so that the rest of the world can sleep at night. It also said Ebola revealed the global health system was not ready for this war. To date, Ebola has killed more than 6,300 people out of 17,800 cases, mostly in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, with the death rate currently at about 70%.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with the Korean national football team as head coach Uli Stilicke held a press conference on Wednesday, capping off a busy week of speaking in front of press members. And the latest press conference, manager Uli Stilicke talked about the week-long training session in Jeju that is set to begin on December 15th. Then a roster consisting of players just from the domestic league and players who play in China and Japan, the 60-year-old made it loud and clear that he'll choose only those that are passionate and hungry to play in the upcoming Asian Cup in January. Meanwhile, the national team is seeking its first Asian Cup trophy since 1960 and has been paired with the host Australia, Kuwait, and Oman in Group A. And now staying in football, Queen's Park Rangers owner and the president of AirAsia, Tony Fernandez, was in Seoul on Wednesday to reveal a tribute plane for Park Ji-sung, which reads, "Thank you, Captain Park," across the plane. And during the press conference, Tony Fernandez continued to show interest in bringing in Korean talents to the Queen's Park Rangers by announcing that they're set to sign 2 more Korean players during the January transfer window. Now, he hasn't hinted on who they might be, as Yoon Suk-young is the lone Korean on the team at the moment. And of course, the AirAsia president wasn't shy about criticizing the recent Korean Air controversy when he stated that he'll serve the popular honey butter chip sealed in bag and soju during AirAsia flights. Now shifting over to baseball, SK Wyverns ace Kim Kwang-hyun is set to get married this coming Sunday, but there's another big date looming as the deadline for the contract negotiations with the San Diego Padres is about 24 hours away. Now, once the SK Wyverns accepted the $2 million posting fee, the two sides were given 30 days to complete a deal. And while the deadline is set for 7 a.m. Korea time Friday, both sides seem rather optimistic in completing a deal. Now, according to the Padres official, Kim Kwang-hyun has already taken a medical, but are still in what they call the wait-and-see mode. And now finishing things off with the 2020 Summer Games in Tokyo, where with the Agenda 2020 being passed, it's likely that baseball will return to the Olympics, but some changes are being considered for the sport as well. Now, the 2 changes that are being considered, the first is the idea of having 7-inning baseball games instead of 9 innings, adding that having 9-inning games will be too long. At the same time, the idea of having only amateur players compete in the Olympics is being tossed around, as well as SoftBank Hawks president and Japanese home run king Sadaharu Oh came out recently agreeing with the ideas. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning, I'm Lee Ji-yeon here with your latest weather updates. Now, nationwide mix of rain and snow fell overnight, but most of the snow and rain clouds have moved out from the peninsula. Only some parts in Jeju Island is receiving rain at this hour, but slippery roads we're waking up to, so be careful out there. Now, this morning is kicking off a lot milder, about 5 to 6 degrees higher than yesterday, but daytime highs will be chillier. So let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The low in Seoul is kicking off at -1, then the afternoon temperature will hike up to 1, while Daegu and Gwangju peak at 8 and 6, and Busan will top out at 10 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island will be getting up to 10 as well, while Daejeon and Dokdo sees highs of 4 and 7. You might want to enjoy this somewhat mild conditions while you can, because things will get quite cold again tomorrow, with highs rising below freezing point here in the capital. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now. Korea Today is coming up at the top of the hour, 7 a.m. Korea time. Have a great day. Goodbye.